Why talk about free will? Why think about free will? Why do anything on the topic? Those who agree will agree, and those who won't still won't. And if people don't have free will, then they don't have any choice in the matter, which kind of makes the very nature of making anything to convince people that they don't have free will kind of weird. Because what's the purpose of this video then? If not to convince the people that believe they are free agents, living free lives, able to make their own choices and decisions as they see fit, that they are none of those things, then it would seem to be here just to confirm the beliefs of others who already believe that we don't have free will, that we don't have free will. So why bother with it at all? Why are you even entertaining this video, outside of the actual lack of choice that you have in the matter? The problem comes that our understanding and knowledge changes our actions. We don't choose what we believe. We don't choose our ability to understand and comprehend things as we do. There's no choice in our ability to have a strong executive system to manage ourselves better, but we live in a world where we judge everyone on where they are in their life, because we are raised believing that everyone makes choices they're responsible for. We are okay with locking away prisoners in grimy, dirty, violent places because we feel they're responsible for their actions. We celebrate the accomplishments of others while deriding others to work harder and accomplish more, blaming people for their failures and their inability to adjust, change, or function in the way necessary to achieve conventional success. We do all of this in the name of free will. We do all of this in the thought that people are fully capable of being responsible for their actions, always capable of making other decisions, and thus the only thing that separates Alex, born to a wealthy family, whose mother took vitamins, never missed a meal, didn't have to stress about finances, and thus his brain was developed fine, from Jackson, born to a poor family, whose mother couldn't go to the doctor regularly, and had to work every day in a physically stressful job just to keep food on the table, and worried every day about her job and about money, are in the end both equally free and capable of succeeding in life. And the only thing that separates them is that one's going to make good choices and the other one just is going to make bad choices. Then we're told that if you dare to question that, then you're diminishing Alex's success as he becomes rich, and you're promoting laziness and crime when Jackson drops out of school, ends up in jail before 20, and struggles financially his entire life. This way of looking at the world has caused endless suffering and callousness amongst people. For when you look at someone struggling, the first thought becomes what they did or didn't do to deserve their place in life. When you look at a person succeeding, you think of all the hard work they did to get that success. And yet, if there is no free will, then the person with nothing is a victim of life, and the person with everything was gifted by life, and neither is better than the other. They're just biological machines that got a lucky roll. If we don't have free will, then the way we treat the worst of us is monstrous, and the way we exalt the best of us would be stupid. And that's what we're going to prove. Let's begin with the physics of it all. Long before the first star ever formed, atoms began a game of cause and effect. Like dominoes being knocked over, a chain reaction began that has been affecting and changing and guiding our lives since the near beginning of the universe. In fact, if we go further back to the very idea that matter and antimatter ended up in a war and somehow matter won out because there was an unequal matter and antimatter, we've been playing a game of cause and effect since the first second of the universe's existence. One move causing another movement. That is still playing out today. Every movement and every action that happens in the universe is directly related to previous actions and movements in the universe. And thus, in this brilliant and sweeping chaotic tapestry of existence, with quintillions of atoms making up our bodies, and somewhere between 10 quadrillion vigintillion and 100,000 quadrillion vigintillion atoms are in the known universe, with everything always in motion and every motion and movement affecting each other, we have the development and formation of the universe, from nebulae to stars, from dust and rock to planets, from molting and uninhabitable to the bedrock of life and creation. Every solitary thing that has happened and formed has been in direct response to the previous actions of the universe. Everything in harmonic synchronicity, creating the entirety of the world. Every bit of function of your brain and body are made of those atoms. From the very sperm cell and egg to every bite of food, inhale of dust, accidental swallowing of a bug has in some form or another become part of you. Before you were even born, and your mother, and your grandmother, and your great-great-grandmother, all the way down throughout all of space and time have contributed to you. Now there will be some who say, well, wait a minute, we have this reality. We don't understand consciousness. Perhaps consciousness does do something different from the quantum level. This is often an argument, however, on the idea that reality is an accurate interpretation of what we see, which, when made by physicists, seems utterly ludicrous. Everything we experience is a process of the mind. Everything that we experience is from impulses and electric signals traveling through other electrical paths and signals, and then landing in the brain, where we then build an interpretation of the world. So when we begin to leave the world of quantum physics, of atoms and matter, most physicists who hold on to the notion of free will do so on the idea that through quantum bubbles and the human brain, we're able to make a different action and different behaviors. But as we'll see, that too is incorrect. The biological lack of free will is one of the clearer and more decisive understandings we have of free will. In his newest book, Determined, A Science of Living Free Without Free Will, Robert Sapolsky, a Caltech neuroscientist who has studied human behavior for 40 years, lays out the neuroscience and biological mechanisms that make a very solid case for why we don't have free will. Let's start with some of the fun anecdotes that he lays out often in every one of his interviews. If a judge is making sentencing or ruling decisions before lunch and is hungry, he'll be harsher than after lunch. Unless the judge is Muslim and it's Ramadan and he's fasting, then he'll be more generous. If it's a person's birthday, the judge will be more generous than if it isn't when it comes to sentencing or ruling in their favor. If a person is in a room with a rancid smell, they are more socially conservative than a person who's in a room that has pleasant aromas. When we measure ACE scores, adverse childhood experiences, for each point a person has, their chance of antisocial behavior increases by 35%. From more violence and drugs and jail before the age of 20, to early pregnancy and poverty, to dropping out of high school. If we look back at people's family history and find that the culture they descended from dealt with plagues or viruses more, they're likely to hold a more xenophobic view of outsiders. If someone's oxytocin levels are high, they're likely to treat an outsider meaner, but their friends and family and those they identify as them, nicer. Every action, every behavior, everything that we think of as us, is rather a mechanism of neurons, of mental development beginning in the fetal period, of economic circumstances which dictate stress and worry, which will then affect people's willpower, their ability to self-regulate. People aren't responding to the situation that is happening with the ability to create a decision based on the situation. They're reacting to everything that has ever happened to them throughout all of existence, before they were even born, from their cultural makeup, from their upbringing, from the smell in the room, to their blood sugar level, meaning that every action comes with it literally thousands of factors and movements and actions for which a person has no control over. And they all build to form the next action they take, and the action after that, which is to say that biologically, we just don't see free will, unless you add in magic. And this is what you see happen so often with leading minds who come up against this wall. They are trying to explain consciousness, seemingly that we can't explain and haven't yet figured out what consciousness is, and thus they pin all their hopes into free will onto consciousness. But they do so by ignoring the history of brain experiments, specifically Roger Sperry's split brain experiments. Roger Sperry would win the Nobel Prize for his study on how the brain works in communicating with both halves. He did this working with people that go through corpus callosomies, or in layman's terms, someone who gets the corpus callosum severed, and he ran tests on how that affected their minds. What he found has changed the landscape of how we understand the brain. As reported in Scientific America, recapping the experiment, to explain how our brains are narrative-making machines, they recount the story of WJ. And it goes like this. WJ was Gazaniga's patient 0, the first in a long line of initials who all pointed in one direction. The two halves of our brain are not created equal. Gazaniga was Sperry's partner. And here's where things get really tricky. If you show a picture of, say, a chicken claw to just the left side of the eye, which means the picture will only be processed by the right hemisphere of the brain, and one of a snowy driveway to the right side of the eye, which means it will only be processed by the left hemisphere, and then ask the individual to point at an image most closely related to what he's seen, the two hands don't agree. The right hand, tied to the left input, will point to a shovel, while the left hand, tied to the right input, will point to a chicken. Ask the person why he's pointing to two objects, and instead of being confused, he'll at once create an entirely plausible explanation. You need a shovel to clean out the chicken coop. His mind has created an entire story, a narrative that will make plausible sense of his hand's discrepancies, when, in reality, it all goes back to those silent images. This brings us to the spiritual side of all of this, that reality is a product of our minds, that this sense of self that we have is a manifestation of the brain. The ideas we have of good and bad, right and wrong, praiseworthy and condemning, are all just created from the mental illusion that is the mind. Our sense of self is created by the ideas and thoughts that our mind creates, but we don't control all the ideas and thoughts our brain makes. Every moment of every second of every day, we are bombarded with stimuli. Driving down the road, we may see a billboard, and in that billboard, it reminds us of something in the past, and suddenly we're faced with an existential crisis. We didn't choose to feel that way. We didn't choose to have the thoughts that we're having. All that happened was that our brain took in some information that we weren't even consciously aware of, and suddenly we began to feel stressed or sad or upset. Then we began to create the reasoning for the action. And all of this is just a story. Something the mind does to try and explain the experiences it thinks it's having. And thus, what feels like choice becomes nothing more than the mechanisms of existence. What feels like you being an autonomous human with your own feelings and thoughts is nothing more than an active left hemisphere making up stories. So what's the point of it all? You are not here to judge life. You are not here to worry about life. You are life. You are the formation and experience of reality all in one place. There is nothing else. There is nothing for you to control, nothing for you to worry about, nothing that you can do that you wouldn't do otherwise. It's okay. Everything is exactly as it's supposed to be, and that can be very hard to accept. That can be very hard to fully understand and experience. We have been raised to believe that every action we take we're responsible for, that we're these independent beings living separate lives that are accountable for our actions, because we are to be in complete control of our actions. But all of that is just part of the story, part of the mythology that we created from our minds in order to feel separate from the world. We are not separate. There is no separation. All separation is an illusion, a way for the mind to engage and interact with the world. But there is only this reality, this life, taking shape and form, not an individual experiencing it, but a product of it living and witnessing the experience. You're not broken. You're not evil. You're not bad. You're not a failure. You're not any of these negative things. And you're not any of the good that you defined yourself with. You just are. You are existence itself, taking shape and form. You are exactly everything you are supposed to be right now and at this moment. You just might not see it yet. And that's why I put together this video. Because at some point and at some time, you're going to feel as if you have failed. As if you're the problem. As if everything is falling apart and everything's wrong and everything's a pain and everything is just not the way you want it to be. And that you made all the mistakes and that you did everything wrong and everyone's going to say it's all your fault. And that nothing you did was right and every choice you made was wrong. But what choice did you have? What ability did you have to change it in that moment, at that time, where you were in your life? You see, everything that we have ever spent our time dealing with, experiencing, holding ourselves responsible for, feeling maddening and angry about, destroying ourselves over, has all been a fraud, a lie, a mistake, a complete and utter nuisance to our existence. And we have used that every time to move further and further away from the truth of our existence. That we are simply here. And we're just experiencing everything. And everything's just playing out on a big stage. A great movie. A great show. And with that realization, you have to understand that you don't control the things that you hope to control. You don't control life. Life will do what life is going to do. You're going to live it. You're going to experience it. And in that, you can discover the truth of your existence, the truth of who you are, the truth of your very being. And in that, you discover that you have always been perfect and complete. Hey, wait 1 second. I've got something big to share with you. Thanks for watching that video. If you made it this far, you hopefully enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed it, we put out one at least every other day. Hit the like button, subscribe, and hit the notification at the bottom of the video. And keep an eye out for the next video. Also, I'm building a community of people who want to transform their lives over a year. It's called the Cosmic Joke Challenge. If you want to find out what the Cosmic Joke Challenge is, you'll learn that and more in our 100% free Facebook group, which will be growing a library of content not available on YouTube. The link will be available in the description box below. Click it, join, and start transforming your life today.